radio crackled, silence broken only by distant echoes of gunfire. A Navy SEAL's voice sliced through the chaos. Who took that shot? The answer would change everything. No one expected it. No one imagined who was behind the perfect, impossible shot that would freeze the battlefield in stunned silence. Staff Sergeant Lila Mercer crouched behind the shattered wall of a ruined compound in Helmand Province. She had been deployed here for 6 months, a soldier among soldiers, yet always in the shadows. Her eyes, a striking steel gray, scanned the ridge line, calculating angles, wind, distance. Around her, the SEAL team moved like ghosts, weapons tight against their shoulders, unaware that their success depended on someone who had been underestimated at every turn. Lila's journey here wasn't built on bravado. She had grown up in a small Montana town, a child of mountains and snow, listening to her father's old stories about patience, resilience, and respect for the hunt. She wasn't just skilled, she was methodical, a mind trained for precision, a heart hardened by quiet losses. Every early morning she had spent alone, learning to read the wind, to breathe with the rhythm of the earth, had led to this moment. The operators didn't know it yet, but her presence would tilt the balance of life and death in their favor. 48 hours earlier, Lila had been nothing more than a name on a roster. Just another intelligence analyst at Forward Operating Base Chapman, her contributions often dismissed or overlooked. While others sought recognition, she focused on craft, on mastery. Maps, satellite imagery, topography, they were her playground. She saw what others missed: hidden ridges, shadowed gullies, concealed approaches. Her childhood had been quiet, but it had taught her the language of patience. Hunting with her father, she learned to move without sound, to wait without expectation. When he passed away, she inherited not just his rifle but his lessons, that true skill often goes unnoticed, that the best hunters don't chase. They wait for the world to offer the perfect shot. Now, in the dust-choked air of Afghanistan, that patience would be tested. Gunfire erupted around her, distant but precise, and she made her calculations. She knew the stakes. One wrong move could cost lives, and yet there was calm in her mind. Calm and certainty, the kind that comes only after years of preparation, years of proving oneself in silence. Lila adjusted her scope, feeling the familiar weight of her rifle against her shoulder. Her hands were steady. The operators below didn't even glance in her direction. They assumed she was another desk-bound analyst, safe behind concrete walls. They had no idea she could change the course of the mission in a heartbeat. The mountains rose like silent judges, their jagged peaks dusted with early autumn snow. Every ridge, every crevice she had memorized from maps and aerial imagery. She listened to the wind, felt its subtle shifts, measured the distance in her bones. This was more than shooting. It was a dance with nature and fate, a negotiation where precision meant survival. Her mind flashed back to her father's last lesson. The shot that no one expects is the one that matters most. She exhaled slowly, aligning the crosshairs, letting the world narrow to a single heartbeat. Around her, chaos reigned, radio chatter, distant explosions, but in this small circle there was only focus, only patience, only the cold certainty of someone who had spent her life preparing for the moment the world demanded what she was capable of. The SEAL team moved into position, unaware of the hidden threat that Lila had already neutralized in her mind. They were confident, experienced, lethal, but even the best can be blind to the quiet, invisible force at their side. She watched a hostile combatant peek from behind a ridge, unaware he was already within her calculated kill zone. Her heart did not race, she did not flinch. Lila had waited years for this precision, for the perfect alignment of timing and chance. She squeezed the trigger softly, a single shot. No flare, no warning, only silence. The enemy dropped before the SEALs even knew he had been a threat. Radio crackled, confused voices calling for suppressive fire for coordinates. And then Briggs' voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Who took that shot?" Silence followed. Not a soldier dared move, not a soul dared answer. The battlefield itself seemed to pause, waiting for the revelation. Then, almost in disbelief, Lila spoke into the mic, calm and steady, her voice cutting through the static. "Staff Sergeant Mercer, target eliminated." Shock rippled through the SEAL team. Briggs froze. His mind replayed every training scenario, every battlefield encounter, and yet he could not reconcile what he was hearing. A female analyst, a supposed support officer, had just executed a flawless, life-saving shot under fire. Lila lowered her rifle, letting her hands rest against the worn stock. Her eyes swept the ridge line again, noting positions, checking for secondary threats. Her mind had already moved to the next calculation, the next step in the mission. The operator's disbelief was palpable, but she didn't wait for approval or accolades. Recognition had never been her goal. Years of preparation, of quiet discipline, had led to this point. Every overlooked suggestion, every dismissed warning, every silent victory had built to this single moment. Lila Mercer had become invisible by design, and that invisibility, that patience, had allowed her to become the difference between life and death for the men who had underestimated her. For a moment, she allowed herself a glance at the snow-dusted mountains beyond, a reminder of home, of lessons learned, of the promise she had made to carry forward the skill, courage, and quiet power inherited from her family. After the mission, Lila returned to her hidden observation post. The mountains stood silent, indifferent, their peaks dusted with snow like ancient witnesses. The team had survived, the target neutralized, yet her mind did not rest. She reviewed footage, recalculated trajectories, analyzed what went right and what could have gone wrong. Excellence was a habit, not a moment. Briggs approached quietly, his usual stoic presence softened by a hint of admiration. "You could have been a SEAL," he murmured, almost to himself. Lila shook her head. "I could have, but I chose this. There's power in being unseen, in watching, in guiding without interference." His eyes lingered on her, recognizing the rare combination of intellect, patience, and courage. Somewhere in the compound below, the enemy's traces had been erased, but the lesson remained. Underestimated forces can shift the balance of life and death. Lila understood this truth better than anyone. She had inherited patience from her father, skill from years of silent training, and courage forged in invisibility. She realized that being underestimated was no longer a disadvantage, it was her greatest weapon. The following week, a new mission demanded precision at the highest stakes, an extraction of hostages deep in hostile territory. Lila was assigned her usual support role, yet the SEALs now treated her presence with cautious respect. They had seen the impossible performed under fire, and they knew that she was more than a map analyst or observer. She was the invisible line between survival and tragedy. As the helicopters descended into the valley, Lila scanned the terrain with meticulous care. Every ridge, every crevice, every shadowed path was mapped in her mind. Her finger hovered over the trigger, ready to guide the operators through the chaos without hesitation. Each shot she called or took was a silent promise that she would protect those who underestimated her. In that moment, alone among the peaks and the wind, Lila felt the weight of invisible responsibility. She thought of her father's lessons, of Montana mornings, of every overlooked contribution that had prepared her for this. She exhaled slowly, letting the mountains absorb her calm determination, knowing the mission's outcome rested as much on patience as on firepower. Gunfire erupted like thunder in the valley below. Operators moved with lethal precision, yet a hidden sniper had taken position, threatening the hostages. Lila calculated distances, wind, angles, everything the team could not see from their exposed position. She held her breath, focusing not on the danger but on the solution. One shot, two shots, threats neutralized before they could harm anyone. The SEALs exchanged incredulous glances over comms. "Who is handling that?" Briggs' voice crackled. Calm measured, Lila responded, "Mercer, hostiles down, path clear." The words barely carried over the wind, yet they carried absolute authority. As the extraction proceeded, the team realized something profound. The greatest acts of courage often go unseen. Lila had acted without ego, without recognition, yet she had changed the course of countless lives. Her quiet strength, honed over years of preparation and invisibility, had become the anchor that allowed the mission to succeed. And somewhere deep inside, she allowed herself a small, fleeting smile, the acknowledgement that she had lived up to every lesson, every promise, every silent sacrifice. Back at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Lila walked through the compound at dusk. Dust swirled around her boots, mixing with the faint scent of burnt coffee and spent gunpowder. Operators glanced her way, some nodding subtly, a silent recognition of her skill and resolve. No applause, no ceremony, just respect earned quietly, invisibly. She paused at the edge of the ridge, watching the sun dip behind jagged peaks. Each moment of silence, each calculation, each patient breath had led her here. Her journey had not been about fame or recognition. It had been about responsibility, about proving that quiet discipline can wield more power than bravado. Lila remembered her father's words one last time. A shot that no one expects is the one that changes everything. She realized she had lived that truth fully, repeatedly, and with unwavering integrity. The mountains whispered around her, ancient and eternal, as if confirming that her invisible courage had made a mark no one could erase. Weeks later, Lila sat at her workstation, reviewing maps and mission logs. The SEALs had moved on to other operations, yet the impact of her actions lingered. Operators spoke quietly among themselves, finally recognizing the invisible force that had guided them through fire and death. Lila's hands rested lightly on her rifle, the weight of responsibility familiar and comforting. She understood that courage isn't always loud. Heroism doesn't always demand applause. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and unseen, like the steady hand guiding a perfect shot. Her gaze drifted to a photograph of her father pinned above her monitor. His smile, weathered and wise, reminded her of every lesson, every sacrifice, every silent victory. Lila Mercer had become the unseen difference, the unexpected shot that